Hi everyone, my name is Nate and you are watching WASD 20. In this video we're going to be taking a look at two mapping books from Wesley Jones. Books that can help you draw fantasy maps better. This video is not sponsored, but Wes did send me these books free of charge. This one he actually sent me all the way back in 2020 and I've been meaning to do a review for a really long time. And this one right here is a more recent release. I think it just came out a few months ago. I will put links to both of them down in the video description, and those are Amazon affiliate links. So any purchases made through those links do help support the channel at no extra cost to you. All right, let's dig in and take a look at the books. All right, so here are the two books, and we're gonna start by taking a look at this one, which released several years ago. Gotten some use out of it for sure, and wanted to share my thoughts. So first off, these books are both self-published, and they're available on Amazon. Retail price looks to be in the neighborhood of $25. Starting off with the table of contents here, I like that the table of contents is very thematic. There's some good world building information in the beginning, pretty basic, just some questions to get you thinking if you don't really know where to start with world building. Some advice on naming things, and then we get some geographical information that could help. Some pretty good detail here and just things to consider in terms of geography basics. Chapter 3 starts us off with tools and materials. We have a lot of hand drawing tools here and analog tools. And then we also get some advice on digital tools. I like this a lot, how to make paper. There's a step-by-step process here that's basically the old, coffee or tea method. And then there's also a little information on how to make paper digitally, which is very nice. Now we get into chapter 4, which is the meat of the book in terms of the map components. I will say that some of this stuff was hit or miss for me. Like this right here just doesn't really seem that useful, but I get the idea. It's just kind of like, hey, start rough and then get a little more nuanced and detailed. And then some of it, I just am not a fan of the style. I like these mountains, this a little bit less so. I like the hills and the cliffs here, but the forests, those are kind of a miss for me. I don't really like this round look. So lots of map components here in chapter 4. I'm not gonna comment on all of them, but we do start to get into some of the less geographic elements like a compass rose and title and cartouche. Am I saying that right? Not a bad border here, but it would have been nice to get lots and lots of examples of different types of borders. And then chapter 5 is all about style, lettering, and coloring. Yeah, lots of just basic ideas here. Pretty good amount of detail, and I like even, just thinking about where to place your lettering. I think that's an important consideration. Lettering by hand versus digitally. And then we get into color schemes here. This stuff seems like it would apply a little bit more for digital maps in terms of the ease of adjusting these things. Watercolor painting versus digital painting. So really nice that they do include both. And personally, I do work in both mediums, mostly digitally these days. Chapter 6 gets us into some thoughts on composition, blocking in the elements, sketching the main elements, sketching the details, really taking a step by step here, which is nice as you see the map progressing into something pretty cool. And then chapter 7, this is probably the strength of the book for me, is just all the examples of different maps. So here, for example, we have Teutonia. We get some lore and history and some just basic world building information. Then we get some style considerations like coastline, labeling mountain ranges, settlements. And then we have the finished map, which is a really nice looking map. Elephantius. Again, we get some world building information, we have the finished map, but in between we get some other stylistic considerations, just stuff that shows up on this map that it can be nice to learn more about. Even use of color here, really cool. So I'm not gonna show all the examples here, but I will show a couple that get a little bit more out there in terms of styles. So here's one, for example, that has kind of a Japanese feel to it, which I really like. This one, treasure map style, which I like as well. This one's really out there, love it, very colorful and vibrant. So you get the idea here, there's just a whole lot of variety in the various styles, and I really like that, and just some commentary on the various elements. So yeah, I do think chapter 7, which actually has a lot of different examples of maps, is probably my favorite chapter in the book. Little author biography as well. So overall, Fantasy Mapping Drawing Worlds I think is a really solid resource for any cartographers out there. However, I do have to compare it to the elephant in the room here, and that is Jared Blando's How to Draw Fantasy Art and RPG Maps. And I gotta say, I do like this book better. This book is a bit cheaper, and while I think you could argue that the art style in this book is not quite as approachable as Wesley Jones, I just think the art is better. And if I'm shooting for drawing maps like one of these guys, I'm gonna shoot for Jared Blando. However, there are things in this book that are not in this one. So it's not a complete apples to apples comparison. You're gonna find some cool things explained and illustrated in this book that are not in this one, and vice versa. If you are really into drawing fantasy maps, get both of them. But if you have to choose one, I'd go with this one personally. All right, next we're gonna take a look at Wesley Jones' more recent release, Fantasy Mapping, Drawing Realms and Kingdoms. In this book, we're obviously zooming in a bit, taking a look at how to map smaller areas, regions, cities, towns, even encounter maps. So a little bit different take on things here. Now we're zooming in a little bit. So in this book, we do get a nice thematic table of contents once again, which I like. And then we get into some drawing advice. This, for the most part, is pretty much exactly the same as some of the information in the other book. Just copied and pasted. Slight differences, but very, very similar. I do believe some of this is newer information. And then in chapter 2, we do get into biomes. And this is where we start to see that this book, we're zooming in a lot more. We're not gonna be taking such a whole world sort of view or continental view. We're zooming in and getting more regional maps and even like town and city maps and things like that in this book. Underground map, water and coastal features, clouds, and then drawing natural features. Once again, you can see that the rivers here are much thicker, much more zoomed in than the rivers in the Drawing Worlds book, which are just simple lines, as you can see here. I like the look of this river, I like the rapids here, but once again, the art style is hit or miss for me. I'm not a big fan of the waterfalls here. The wetlands, I'm not really sure that's reading as wetlands for me, though some of these things are a real challenge to draw. I do like the rocks, and I do actually really like the forests in this book. I like them better than the Drawing Worlds book, actually. Ice, snow, cliffs, hills, mountains, and caves. And then chapter 4 is drawing built features. Drawing farms, roads, bridges, docks, buildings. I like this stuff. So far, so good, I think, on these. And I love all these examples, just giving us a whole lot of buildings. We don't need step-by-step instructions on 1 or 2 buildings as much as we need just draw us some examples of various buildings. I think this is great. Most of us can copy this or be inspired by this to make our own. So 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of just all different sorts of structures. I love that. An example of a city block here, which I think this is great. A camp. And then chapter 5 gets us into text. Lots of different examples of how to do text, and I really like that, so you can make your own decisions about how you want to do it. And chapter 6, some of the map surrounds. Borders, a couple different examples of borders, which I appreciate. A couple different examples of compasses as well. This is great. Chapter 7 is grids and perspective. So here we get some different examples of how you can draw, top-down maps. You can put a hex on it or not. You can put a grid on it or not. And then the isometric idea here. Isometric or bird's eye perspective, I should say. Hey, we're getting artsy here with the color wheel, so that's cool. Again, different color schemes, similar to what we saw in the other book, but this is useful artistic information for sure. Maps at daytime versus evening and night. And then chapter 9, world building. So it is interesting that in the other book, the world building stuff was at the beginning, and here we get it more at the end. I don't know which one I prefer. I think maybe having it at the beginning might be a little bit better. But anyway, so some useful world building prompts here, and there is some repetition from the other book, but there are some new questions as well. Language creation, that's an interesting one. Map scale. And then chapter 10, we get into the composition, which is again kind of that step-by-step process of actually drawing a map. And I do like this step-by-step. You can see the progress, how the map is going here, getting more and more detailed, adding color, shading and highlights. So pretty cool. And here's another example of a map. This one a little more zoomed in, more like a battle map, really. It looks good. I think the art style is more approachable than Jared Blando's probably, but personally, I just like the way Jared's maps look a lot better. Chapter 11, we get more finished maps. And so here again are just a whole bunch of examples and a little bit of, the artistic considerations on each one. Drawing clouds on your map. Here's one about atmospheric perspective. Using a hex grid. Different color schemes. Again, some really interesting and a huge variety in terms of the style of maps, which is really cool. I would have liked to see a few more examples. I feel like there was just a little bit less than in Wesley's other book, Drawing Worlds. All right, so that is Fantasy Mapping, Drawing Realms and Kingdoms. Now, I do want to mention that Jared Blando also has a similar book to this one. This is Fantasy Map Maker, How to Draw RPG Cities for Gamers and Fans. And this is not one that I loved quite as much, so I would say this one covers a bit more broad ground, and this one gets a little more specific to towns and cities. They're both decent books. I'm glad I have both. They're going to be good resources for me because I draw maps quite a bit, and I'm always looking for new ideas. So all in all, I think these are both solid releases. I think Wesley Jones is doing a good job, and I hope he keeps making maps and keeps making books so that we can all enjoy them. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those down below. I always love to hear from you. I also do want to mention that I actually have some openings in my map commission schedule, which doesn't happen very often. So if you're interested in getting a map done, I'll put some examples of my work up on the screen here. I do world maps, region maps, even dungeon and smaller maps. Whether it's for a personal project, a map for your homebrew RPG world, or whether it's for a novel or other published RPG book, let me know. I would love to help you out. My website for mapping is sellswordmaps.com, and you can just click on the commissions tab to get more information, or email me directly at sellswordmaps@gmail.com. Lastly, before we go, I do want to thank the WASD20 patrons for their support. These amazing people help keep the channel afloat, and I really appreciate it. You can check it out over at patreon.com/WASD20. All right, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like, make sure you're subscribed, and take care, everybody. You'll see me again very soon.